We are now doing chapter 12, which is going to be function or class-based components, introducing hooks. I'm going to be the driver. Sharon is going to be my navigator. And in this chapter, we're going to consider that the components we have so far gone through in this book are class-based components that support state and life cycle methods. But there is another kind of component called functional component that is defined by a function, and it looks something like this, right? Or like this if you want to use an arrow function. So the advantages that class-based components give us include that they can access component level state, making it easier to handle input and update its view with set state. With hooks, functional based components can now have component level state and lifecycle methods. But is hooks just about functional components replicating functionality from class-based ones? If it were so, why not just continue using class-based components? So what are we going to see in the following sections is that the hooks is going to be it's going to make it easier to share logic between different components, which can be hard to address using class-based components. So hooks in essence allow us to reuse logic. So to illustrate the usage of hooks, we will work on a new project. So we're going to create a new project called Hello Hooks. As you can see, I've already created mine. To do that, we use the create react app and then we give it the name of the project. And then because we'll be using React Bootstrap, we're going to be installing React Bootstrap and Bootstrap, right? So in our app.js, we are going to suppose that we have the below class-based code here, right? As you can see, and in this class-based code, we'll make use of hooks to refactor this to a functional component with a state. Because we refactor, let's first have a quick introduction to the different functions the hook system provides. So the hook library provides the following functions: use state, use effect, use constant, use context, and use ref. Right. So use state allows a functional component to use component level state. Use effect allows a functional component to use lifecycle methods. Use context allows a functional component to use context system, and use ref allows a functional component to use ref to make reference to a DOM element. So when converting our class component to a functional component in our app.js, we have to change the following, right? So as you can see, we change it from a class component to a functional component using the arrow function as I have here in my code, and we're going to add the following code here, right? As you can see, so in this added code, we import the use state from the React library as we will be using it for hooks, and the rest of the import statements remain the same as the class component. So after that, we're going to have the declaration of the function app, right? And then we are going to go to our use state, right, which technically returns two elements. The first element returned is assigned to requested, which contains the current value of this piece of state. And so in our class component, our state was an object with its values in it, right, which was requested and post URL, right? But with the use state hook, we declare a value in our state one at a time, right? So in our hooks, we will move away from declaring an object containing all of our state to declaring the individual states themselves. For example, if we want to add a counter in our state, in a class component it would be like this, but then for a functional component it will be like this, right? So now if we want to fetch data using use effect, we would typically do data fetching in component did mount with a class component. We showed that in chapter 9, right? But now we're going to put the request data logic into use effect. As we see here, firstly we need to import it, then we add the following code. So what this code does is that, like I said, we first import use effect, and then we declare an array data that holds the requested data in our state. We initialize that array to an empty array, then we call use effect in that code, right? So instead of calling this .set.state, this .set state with the object, we use set data, and then we pass in data into it, right? So for the infinite use effect, we don't specify the second parameter, as you can see here, and then that would be the equivalent of component did update, which runs every time the component gets new props or a state change happens, right? So to mimic component did mount, we have to pass in an empty array as a second argument to use effect. where the request will be made only once. So if we want to display our requested data, we have to render our requested data and add the below map function. You see this map function here, right? So that's what we're going to add, as you can see here in our unordered list. And then we will meet with a problem where if we click to-dos, it should list out the to-dos also, but it doesn't. So that's because use effects is called only once, because we've configured it to do so with the empty array, but we want it to just be like component did mount. So to achieve that, we simply specify the requested into the array, right? Instead of having it empty, we put requested into the array. Then the to-dos can display without any problems because it has the ID and title attribute. So now if we want to use extractable reuse logic, we can encapsulate our logic in a React hook and then import that hook and when we want to use it. So for example, we'll encapsulate our request logic in a hook, and we're gonna create this file here, usefetch.js. So in our usefetch.js, we're going to move our use effect like this, and then to use our newly created usefetch hook in app.js, we'll make the following changes here, right? So if I go back to app.changes, as you can see, we remove this use state here with the empty array. We put in the use fetch requested, and we are going to remove the use effect here, right, as you can see here. So to show this by fetching users and printing out their names with our newly created fetch hook, we'll need to create a new file called users.js, and our users.js needs to have the following here, which is just the unordered list. It's a function based component that has the variable users, which is the API URL to fetch the users, and then we display them using this map function here in our unordered list. Then in app.js, we render the users component by first importing it using this line here, import users from /users, and then we're gonna add it, right? So in summary, with this knowledge, we can move on and build more complicated enterprise level fully functional React applications of our own. So I hope you enjoyed this and we would like to learn more. And yes, this was the chapter about using function-based components instead of class-based components, and also introducing hooks. So just to see what this looks like in our browser when it's running, just gonna open it here, and as you can see, we have our to-dos and we have our posts, right? So as you can see here, when I click on the link, it changes, right? So that is all from my side. I was the driver and Sharon was my navigator. That was chapter 12. Thank you. Bye bye.